The Serpent's Pearl. Chapter 1. The Unseen Realm of Maganjan. Nestled in the heart of Leyte Island, Maganjan was not just any forest. It was a place where magic thrived. This enchanted woodland sprawled across the southern fringe of the so-called Leyte Cordillera. At its core stood Mount Maganjan, a majestic peak rising high above sea level, serving as a silent sentinel over the mystical realm below. Maganjan was more than just a forest. It was a living, breathing entity. From enchanted streams that sang lullabies as they weave across the expansive forest, to trees that seemed to move of their own accord, the forest pulsed with mystical energy. This magical essence was most concentrated in the area known to humans as the Kwapnit Balan Sasayan National Park, a protected sanctuary spanning hundreds of hectares. At the heart of this wondrous place was Sitrong, the serpent guardian of this magical realm. The carbuncle he bore upon his forehead was no ordinary gem. It granted him wisdom beyond measure and the ability to communicate with all living things. This mystical jewel was a physical manifestation of the forest's magic and life force, passed down through generations of worthy guardians. Sitrong was revered by the creatures of Maganjan, each of whom played a crucial role in maintaining the delicate balance of their home. There was Dali, a spotted deer, whose swiftness and grace were unmatched. As one of the critically endangered species in the forest, Dali represented the fragile beauty that Sitrong and his companions fought to protect. Daya, a hornbill, possessed knowledge spanning centuries. Her presence in Maganjan was a testament to the forest's unique biodiversity, as she was one of the 3 bird species endemic to the islands of Leyte, Samar, and Bohol. Daya's wisdom complemented Sitrong's, often providing crucial insights during times of crisis. Bante, a long-tailed macaque, was known for his agility and cleverness. His mischievous nature brought levity to the forest, but his quick thinking had saved his friends from danger more than once. Bante represented the adaptability and resilience of Maganjan's inhabitants. Another notable resident was Ligaya, the young tree squirrel whose curiosity often led her to discover hidden wonders and potential threats alike. Her youthful energy and inquisitive nature served as a reminder to Sitrong of the importance of nurturing the next generation of forest guardians. Together, this diverse group of creatures maintained the harmony of their home, ensuring that the magic of Maganjan continued to flourish. They faced numerous challenges, from natural disasters to human encroachment, but their unity and the power of the carbuncle had always seen them through. The forest itself was a character in this tale, with its old-growth trees serving as silent witnesses to centuries of history. The Nara trees stood tall and proud, their sturdy trunks a symbol of strength and endurance. Bamboo groves whispered secrets in the breeze, their flexibility a lesson in adapting to change. And at the center of it all was Lola Amihan, the ancient strangler fig tree that served as Sitrong's home and the spiritual heart of Maganjan. As guardian, Sitrong bore the responsibility of protecting not just the visible wonders of Maganjan, but also its hidden treasures. The forest was home to numerous endangered species, including the elusive tarsier and the Visayan warty pig, locally known as baboyahalas. These creatures relied on the magic of the carbuncle and the wisdom of Sitrong to preserve their home against the ever-encroaching threats from the outside world. In this realm where magic and nature intertwined, Sitrong and his companions faced each day with courage and determination, knowing that their actions rippled far beyond the borders of Maganjan, affecting the delicate balance of life throughout the islands of the eastern Visayas. One fateful day, dark omens began to stir in the forest. The once vibrant energy of Maganjan felt uneasy, as if sensing an approaching storm. The leaves of the ancient trees rustled with whispered warnings, and the streams gurgled with anxious murmurs. Even the usually cheerful birdsong took on a somber tone, as if the forest itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something ominous. Sitrong, ever vigilant in his role as guardian, was the first to sense the shift. The carbuncle on his forehead pulsed with an urgent, erratic rhythm. its usual warm glow now tinged with a cold, bluish light. He slithered swiftly through the underbrush, his scales barely making a sound as he moved to investigate the source of the disturbance. As he neared the eastern border of Maganjan, where the dense foliage gave way to rocky outcroppings, Sitrong encountered Daya the hornbill. The wise bird's usually calm demeanor was ruffled, her feathers standing on end as she perched nervously on a low-hanging branch. "Sitrong," Daya called out, her voice hushed with worry. "Something is not right. The winds carry whispers of a malevolent force. Have you felt it?" The serpent guardian nodded solemnly. "Indeed, old friend. The forest's energy is in turmoil. What have you heard?" Daya's eyes darted nervously as she spoke. "There are rumors of a dark sorcerer, one whose heart has been consumed by ambition and greed. The creatures at the forest's edge speak of his approach with fear in their voices." As if summoned by their words, a chilling breeze swept through the clearing, carrying with it the acrid scent of dark magic. The leaves of nearby plants withered and curled at its touch, and small creatures scurried for cover. "His name is Datu," a new voice interjected. Bante the macaque dropped down from the canopy above, his usual mischievous grin replaced by a grim expression. "I've been scouting the borders, and I've seen him. He's like no sorcerer I've ever encountered before." Sitrong's carbuncle flashed with concern. "Tell me more, Bante. What have you observed?" The macaque's tail twitched nervously as he recounted his findings. "Datu hails from a distant land, far beyond the shores of our island. The birds that have traveled speak of his reputation. A man driven mad by his lust for power, delving into magic so dark and forbidden that even the shadows fear him." Daya ruffled her feathers, a shudder passing through her. "But why has he come to Maganjan? Surely our peaceful forest holds nothing of interest for such a being." Sitrong's eyes narrowed, the carbuncle on his forehead pulsing with a knowing light. "I fear it is not the forest itself he seeks, but rather the power that protects it." The carbuncle's energy must have drawn his attention. As if to confirm his suspicions, a distant rumble of thunder echoed through the forest, though the sky remained clear. The very air seemed to thicken, becoming heavy with the weight of impending conflict. Bante leaped to a higher branch, his keen eyes scanning the horizon. "He's not alone," the macaque reported, his voice tight with tension. "I saw him surrounded by shadowy figures, creatures twisted by dark magic, neither fully animal nor human." Sitrong absorbed this information, his mind racing to formulate a plan. "We must warn the others," he decided. "Daya, fly to Lola Amihan and inform her of the situation. Her wisdom will be crucial in the coming days. Bante, gather our swiftest messengers. Every creature in Maganjan must be alerted to the danger." As his companions departed on their missions, Sitrong turned his gaze to the east, where the threat loomed. The carbuncle's light intensified, reflecting the Guardian's determination. He knew that the coming battle would test him in ways he had never been tested before, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead to protect his beloved forest. In the distance, barely visible through the thick foliage, a figure cloaked in shadows stood atop a rocky outcrop. Datu, the dark sorcerer, surveyed the lush expanse of Maganjan with eyes that gleamed with malevolent intent. A cruel smile played across his lips as he sensed the power emanating from the heart of the forest, the power of the carbuncle he so desperately sought. "Soon," Datu whispered, his voice carrying on the wind like a venomous hiss, "soon the power of Maganjan will be mine, and all shall bow before me." As night fell over the forest, an unnatural darkness seemed to creep in from the edges, threatening to engulf the once peaceful realm. Sitrong knew that the battle for Maganjan's soul was about to begin, and the fate of not just the forest, but perhaps the entire world, hung in the balance. Chapter 2: Sorcerer's Arrival. Datu's arrival in Maganjan was marked by an eerie silence. Birds ceased their songs, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The sorcerer moved with purpose, his eyes gleaming with a cold, calculating light. He was determined to claim the carbuncle and harness its power for his own nefarious purposes. Born in a distant land across the sea, Datu had once been a respected shaman in his village. His early years were spent learning the traditional ways of healing and communing with nature spirits. However, a thirst for knowledge and power led him down a darker path. He began to seek out forbidden texts and ancient artifacts, each one corrupting his soul a little more. Datu's transformation from healer to dark sorcerer was gradual but irreversible. He discovered an ancient book that spoke of a mystical jewel hidden in a faraway forest, a jewel that could grant its bearer unimaginable power. This knowledge became an obsession, consuming his every waking moment. Years of preparation had led to this moment. Datu had honed his dark arts, sacrificing his humanity bit by bit in exchange for arcane knowledge. His once kind features were now sharp and severe, his eyes holding an otherworldly glow. Tattoos of forbidden symbols covered his arms and chest, each one pulsing with dark energy. As he ventured deeper into Maganjan, Datu's presence seemed to corrupt the very air around him. Flowers wilted in his wake, and small creatures fled in terror. The sorcerer paid no heed to the destruction he caused. His mind was focused solely on his goal. The ancient trees began to whisper warnings, their leaves rustling with urgent messages. "A dark presence approaches," they murmured. "The guardian must be alerted." These whispers traveled through root and branch, a network of communication as old as the forest itself. As the ominous presence of Datu loomed over Maganjan, Sitrong sought the wisdom of Lola Amihan, the ancient balute tree that served as the spiritual heart of the forest. Coiling around one of her massive roots, Sitrong looked up at the rustling leaves above, his carbuncle glowing with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Lola Amihan," Sitrong began, his voice a soft hiss, "I fear we face a threat unlike any we've encountered before. What can you tell me about this dark sorcerer, Datu?" The ancient tree's leaves rustled, and a warm breeze carried her voice to Sitrong. "Ah, my dear guardian, the tale of Datu is a long and tragic one. It is a story of how even the noblest of intentions can lead one astray if not tempered by wisdom and compassion." Sitrong settled more comfortably, preparing himself for the tale. "Please, Lola Amihan, share with me what you know. Understanding our enemy may be key to protecting Maganjan." "Very well," Lola Amihan's voice whispered through her leaves. "Datu's story begins far from here, across the sea in a land of many islands. He was born into the Magino class, the highest caste of his people, destined from birth to be a leader." "A leader?" Sitrong asked, surprised. "How does one go from a position of such responsibility to becoming a dark sorcerer?" Lola Amihan's branches swayed gently. "Patience, young guardian. The path from light to darkness is often a gradual one. Datu was raised to be a noble, a chief of his people. From a young age, he was trained in the arts of leadership, warfare, and spirituality. As he grew, Datu showed exceptional promise. He was skilled in martial arts, a natural leader, and had a particular aptitude for communing with nature spirits. His people saw him as their future, a leader who would guide them to prosperity and protect them from harm." Sitrong nodded, his forked tongue flicking out thoughtfully. "It sounds as though he was much like a guardian, in a way. What changed?" "Ambition, my dear Sitrong. Ambition and an insatiable thirst for knowledge," Lola Amihan replied. "Datu's desire to protect and elevate his people led him to seek out power beyond the traditional boundaries of his role. He began to travel, visiting distant lands and learning from various cultures. He sought out ancient texts and artifacts, each promising greater power and knowledge. At first, his intentions were noble. He truly believed that with enough power, he could ensure the safety and prosperity of his people." Sitrong's carbuncle pulsed with understanding. "But power can be a dangerous lure, can't it?" Lola Amihan? Indeed, young one. With each new piece of forbidden knowledge, each arcane ritual mastered, Datu's soul became a little more corrupted. He justified his actions as necessary for the greater good, but slowly, he began to lose sight of his original noble intentions. The final turning point came when Datu discovered an ancient tome that spoke of a mystical jewel hidden in a faraway forest, our very own Maganjan. The book described the carbuncle you now bear, Sitrong, and hinted at the incredible power it could grant its bearer. Sitrong's coils tightened reflexively around Lola Amihan's root. So that's why he's come. He seeks the power of the carbuncle. Yes, Lola Amihan confirmed. The knowledge of the carbuncle became an obsession for Datu. He abandoned his people and his responsibilities, focusing all his energy on preparing for a journey to Maganjan. But surely his people tried to stop him? Sitrong asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Lola Amihan's leaves rustled sadly. Some did try, but by then, Datu's power had grown considerably. Those who opposed him were dealt with. Many others, seeing his growing strength, chose to follow him out of fear or misguided loyalty. Sitrong fell silent for a moment, processing this information. It's hard to imagine someone falling so far from their intended path. How did he transform from a respected leader to the dark sorcerer we now face? The transformation was gradual but relentless, Lola Amihan explained. Datu spent years honing his dark arts, sacrificing more and more of his humanity in exchange for arcane knowledge and power. He adorned himself with tattoos of forbidden symbols, each one pulsing with dark energy. His once kind features became sharp and severe, his eyes taking on an otherworldly glow. The man who now approaches our forest is but a shadow of the noble leader he was once destined to become. He is driven by an all-consuming desire for the carbuncle's power, with little regard for the destruction he may cause in his pursuit. Sitrong's carbuncle flashed with determination. Then we must stop him, Lola Amihan. We cannot allow him to claim the carbuncle and unleash its power for his dark purposes. Indeed, young guardian. But remember, Datu was not always the villain he has become. In facing him, you may find that understanding his past could be key to overcoming him in the present. What do you mean, Lola Amihan? Sitrong asked, his head tilting in curiosity. The ancient tree's voice took on a thoughtful tone. Consider this, Sitrong. Datu's fall began with a desire to protect and elevate his people. In his heart, misguided though it may now be, he may still believe he is working towards a greater good. You're suggesting that there might still be a spark of his former self within him? Sitrong mused. It's possible, Lola Amihan replied. The path of darkness is seductive, but it is never truly irreversible. Sometimes, being reminded of one's true nature can be more powerful than any magic. Sitrong nodded slowly, his mind racing with the implications of this information. Thank you, Lola Amihan. Your wisdom, as always, provides much to consider. But tell me, how do you know so much about Datu's past? A warm breeze rustled through Lola Amihan's leaves, carrying a hint of amusement. Ah, my dear Sitrong, you forget that my roots reach deep and far. The earth carries whispers of events from distant lands, and over the centuries, I have learned to listen. Moreover, she continued, Datu's story is not unique. Throughout history, there have been many who have walked the path from light to darkness. The details may change, but the essence of the tale remains the same. Sitrong uncoiled himself, preparing to leave. You've given me much to think about, Lola Amihan. Datu's imminent arrival leaves us little time to prepare, but perhaps understanding his past will help us face the threat he poses. Remember, young guardian, Lola Amihan's voice grew solemn. In facing Datu, you face not just a dark sorcerer, but a man who has lost his way. Your strength lies not only in the power of the carbuncle, but in your connection to Maganjan and all its inhabitants. Where Datu stands alone, driven by his selfish desires, You are part of something greater." Sitrong's carbuncle glowed warmly in response. "Thank you, Lola Amihan. I will carry your wisdom with me as we prepare for the challenges ahead." Sitrong set off to gather his allies and prepare for Datu's arrival. The knowledge of the sorcerer's past weighed heavily upon him, adding layers of complexity to the impending confrontation. As he moved through the forest, alerting its inhabitants to the coming danger, Sitrong couldn't help but wonder if there might be a way to reach the noble leader that Datu had once been, buried deep beneath layers of darkness and corruption. The forest of Maganjan hummed with nervous energy as night fell, its creatures big and small preparing for the arrival of the dark sorcerer. And at the heart of it all, Sitrong, the Serpent Guardian, stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed not only with the power of the carbuncle, but with the wisdom of Lola Amihan and the united strength of the forest he had sworn to protect. Datu sensed the forest's resistance to his presence. A cruel smile played across his lips as he raised his staff, a gnarled piece of wood topped with a crystal that glowed with a sickly green light. "Your petty magic cannot stop me," he hissed, sending a pulse of dark energy into the ground. The nearest trees groaned in pain, their bark cracking under the assault. Deep within the heart of Maganjan, Sitrong felt the disturbance like a physical blow. The carbuncle on his forehead pulsed with a warning glow, its light flickering like a heartbeat. Each pulse sent a wave of images through Sitrong's mind, glimpses of Datu's approach and the damage he was causing. Sensing the imminent danger, Sitrong summoned his closest allies. Dolly the deer arrived first, her graceful movements belying the urgency of the situation. Daya the hornbill swooped down from the canopy, her usually calm demeanor ruffled. Bante the macaque swung in last, his eyes wide with concern. "We must prepare," Sitrong said, his voice steady but grave. "A dark sorcerer named Datu seeks the jewel. He must not be allowed to claim it." The guardian's words carried the weight of prophecy, and his companions felt a chill run down their spines. "What can we do against such dark magic?" Dolly asked, her voice trembling slightly. Sitrong's carbuncle glowed brighter, its warmth spreading through the gathered friends. "We have something Datu does not, the true magic of Maganjan. Our strength lies not in individual power, but in our unity and our connection to this land." As Sitrong spoke, the very air around them seemed to thicken with magical energy. The Guardian began to outline their plan of defense, each word infused with the ancient power of the forest. Meanwhile, Datu continued his relentless advance. With each step, he could feel the pull of the carbuncle growing stronger. "Soon," he muttered to himself, "soon all this power will be mine, and the world will tremble at my feet." The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of Maganjan and perhaps the world beyond. As darkness fell, both Sitrong and Datu prepared for the battle ahead, each knowing that only one could emerge victorious. Chapter 3: The Siege. As dawn broke over Maganjan, the forest held its breath in anticipation. Datu, the dark sorcerer, had begun his relentless march towards the heart of the magical realm. His journey, however, was far from the easy conquest he had envisioned. From the moment Datu set foot in Maganjan, he felt the forest's resistance. The air itself seemed to thicken, making each step a struggle. The lush canopy above conspired to block out the sunlight, casting him in an eerie, green-tinged twilight that made navigation challenging. Sitrong and his allies had worked tirelessly through the night, preparing a series of magical traps and obstacles to impede Datu's progress. As the sorcerer pushed deeper into the forest, he encountered the first of these defenses. Thick vines, imbued with Sitrong's protective magic, suddenly sprang to life. They snaked across Datu's path with surprising speed, wrapping around his ankles and attempting to trip him. The sorcerer stumbled, nearly falling face first into the loamy soil. "Cursed plants!" Datu snarled, his eyes flashing with anger. He raised his gnarled staff, its crystal tip glowing with sickly green energy. With a word of power, he sent a pulse of dark magic through the vines, causing them to wither and retreat. But the forest was far from done. As Datu pressed on, the ground beneath his feet began to shift and change. What had appeared to be solid earth suddenly gave way, revealing patches of quicksand that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The sorcerer found himself sinking, the magical mire pulling him down with surprising strength. Enough of these childish tricks, Datu roared. He muttered an incantation, and a swirl of dark energy enveloped him, lifting him out of the quicksand and depositing him on solid ground. But the effort had cost him, beads of sweat forming on his brow. As he paused to catch his breath, Datu became aware of the forest's watchful presence. Eyes peered at him from the undergrowth, curious squirrels, wary deer, and countless birds all observing his progress. He could feel their fear, but also their determination to protect their home. "Foolish creatures," he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You cannot stop me. The jewel will be mine, and with it, the power to reshape the world as I see fit." But even as he spoke, Datu felt a flicker of doubt. The forest's defenses were proving more formidable than he had anticipated. He had expected to find a peaceful, unsuspecting realm, ripe for the taking. Instead, he was met with a united front of resistance, the very essence of Maganjan rising up to reject his presence. As he pushed on, the obstacles became more challenging. A swarm of butterflies, their wings shimmering with an unnatural light, surrounded him. At first, Datu dismissed them as harmless, but soon realized their true purpose. The butterflies' wings were coated with a magical pollen that confused the senses. Datu found himself disoriented, his vision blurring and his sense of direction skewed. Growling in frustration, the sorcerer unleashed a wave of dark energy, scattering the butterflies. But the effort left him drained, his reserves of magical power depleting faster than he had expected. "I underestimated you, Maganjan," Datu admitted grudgingly. "But make no mistake, I will not be denied. The carbuncle will be mine, no matter the cost." As he spoke these words, a distant rumble of thunder echoed through the forest. Storm clouds began to gather overhead, despite the clear skies that had prevailed just moments before. The air crackled with tension, as if the very elements were responding to the conflict unfolding below. Deep in the heart of the forest, Sitrong felt each of Datu's advances. The carbuncle on his forehead pulsed with each magical confrontation, sending waves of information to the Serpent Guardian. Surrounded by his allies, Dali the deer, Daya the hornbill, and Bante the macaque, Sitrong coordinated the forest defenses. "He's stronger than we anticipated," Sitrong admitted, his voice tinged with concern, "but he's also growing frustrated and careless. We must keep up the pressure." Daya ruffled her feathers nervously. "But for how long can we hold him back? He seems determined to reach the carbuncle at any cost." Sitrong's eyes gleamed with determination. "We don't need to hold him back indefinitely. We just need to wear him down, force him to expend his energy. When the time is right, we'll confront him directly." As if in response to Sitrong's words, a flash of lightning illuminated the darkening sky, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. The gathering storm mirrored the building tension in Maganjan, as two powerful forces drew ever closer to a fateful confrontation. Back on his arduous path, Datu pressed on, his determination unwavering despite the challenges. With each obstacle he overcame, his anger grew, along with his resolve to claim the carbuncle's power. The forest had proven to be a worthy adversary, but in Datu's mind, it was merely delaying the inevitable. Little did the dark sorcerer know that his greatest challenge still lay ahead. As he drew closer to the heart of Maganjan, Sitrong and his allies were preparing for a final stand, one that would determine the fate of the forest and perhaps the world beyond. The storm clouds overhead grew darker, and a heavy rain began to fall, as if the sky itself were weeping for the conflict unfolding below. In this rain-soaked, magic-charged atmosphere, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of both Datu's dark powers and the united strength of Maganjan's defenders. As the storm raged outside, Sitrong and his friends gathered in a secluded glade deep within Maganjan. The ancient trees formed a protective circle around them, their branches intertwining overhead to create a natural shelter from the rain. The air was thick with tension and the scent of damp earth, but also with a sense of determination and unity. Sitrong coiled himself in the center of the glade, his carbuncle glowing with a steady, pulsating light. Around him stood his closest allies. Dolly the deer, her graceful form taut with nervous energy. Daya the hornbill, perched on a low-hanging branch, her wise eyes surveying the group, and Bante the macaque, fidgeting restlessly but alert. "Friends," Sitrong began, his voice carrying clearly despite the rumble of thunder outside, "we face a threat unlike any Maganjan has seen before. Datu's power is formidable, and his determination unwavering. But we have something he does not. We are part of this forest, bound to it in ways he can never understand." The gathered animals nodded in agreement, drawing closer to hear Sitrong's words. "We must use the power of the forest to our advantage," Sitrong continued. "Datu is strong, but he underestimates the bond we share with Maganjan. It is time to devise a plan that will turn his arrogance into our strength." Dolly stepped forward, her eyes filled with determination. "What can we do to help, Sitrong? We're ready to defend our home, no matter the cost." Sitrong's carbuncle pulsed warmly at Dolly's words. "Each of us has a unique gift," he replied, his gaze sweeping over his friends. "Dolly, your swift legs and keen senses will be invaluable. You can scout ahead, warning us of Datu's movements and leading him into our traps." The deer nodded, pawing the ground eagerly. "I won't let you down, Sitrong. I know every path and hidden trail in Maganjan. Datu won't take a step without us knowing." Turning to the hornbill, Sitrong continued, "Daya, your wisdom and knowledge of the forest will guide us. You've lived through countless seasons and have seen threats come and go. Your insights will be crucial in anticipating Datu's next moves." Daya ruffled her feathers, her eyes gleaming with ancient knowledge. "I've been preparing for this moment, Sitrong. I've recalled old spells and protections that haven't been used in generations. They may be just what we need to counter Datu's dark magic." "Excellent," Sitrong nodded approvingly before turning to the macaque. "Bante, your agility and resourcefulness will keep us one step ahead of Datu. Your quick thinking has saved us more than once, and we'll need that cleverness now more than ever." Bante grinned, bouncing on his feet. "You can count on me, Sitrong. I've got a few tricks up my fur that'll make that sorcerer wish he'd never set foot in Maganjan." "Together," Sitrong concluded, "we will create obstacles and diversions to slow his progress. But more than that, we'll show Datu the true power of Maganjan, not just in magic, but in our unity and our connection to this land." As they began to discuss specific strategies, Sitrong felt a surge of energy from the carbuncle. He closed his eyes, focusing on the ancient magic that flowed through the forest. The air around them shimmered with energy, and the trees seemed to lean closer, their leaves rustling with anticipation. "Maganjan," Sitrong whispered, his voice carrying a power that made his friends fall silent, "lend us your strength. We are your children, your protectors, and your voice. Guide our actions and fortify our resolve. Together, we will defend our home." As if in response to Sitrong's plea, a warm breeze swept through the glade, carrying with it the scents of 1,000 flowers and the whispers of countless leaves. The animals felt a renewed sense of purpose, their bodies tingling with the forest's magic. Daya spoke up, her voice filled with awe. "I can feel it, Sitrong. The forest is with us. It's as if every tree, every blade of grass, is ready to join our fight." Sitrong nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Yes, and we must use this connection wisely. Datu's power comes from dark rituals and stolen knowledge. Ours comes from our bond with Maganjan and with each other. That will be our greatest strength." As the group huddled closer, Sitrong began to outline their plan of action. They would use the forest's natural features to their advantage, creating illusions to confuse Datu and lead him astray. Dolly would use her speed to lay false trails, while Bante would set up clever traps using vines and fallen logs. Daya's role would be to counter Datu's magic with ancient forest spells, weakening his defenses and disrupting his concentration. And Sitrong, drawing on the power of the carbuncle, would coordinate their efforts and prepare for the final confrontation. Remember, Sitrong cautioned as they finalized their plans, "Our goal is not just to defeat Datu, but to protect Maganjan. We must be careful not to cause unnecessary harm to the forest in our defense of it." The animals nodded solemnly, understanding the delicate balance they needed to maintain. As they prepared to put their plan into action, the storm outside began to intensify. Lightning flashed more frequently, illuminating the glade in brief, brilliant bursts. But rather than fear, the gathered defenders of Maganjan felt a sense of anticipation. They knew that the coming battle would test them in ways they had never been tested before. But they also knew that they stood united, backed by the ancient power of the forest and bound by their love for their home. Sitrong looked at each of his friends in turn, seeing the determination in their eyes. "Are we ready?" he asked, his voice steady and strong. "Ready," they replied in unison, their voices blending with the thunder outside. And with that, the defenders of Maganjan set out into the storm-lashed forest, prepared to face the dark sorcerer and protect their beloved home, no matter the cost. Chapter 4: Sword of Dark, Shield of Light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Maganjan transformed. The fading light painted the sky in hues of amber and crimson, casting long shadows across the forest floor. These shadows seemed to dance and twist, taking on lives of their own in the twilight realm between day and night. Datu found himself in a dense thicket, the air thick with tension and the scent of magic. An eerie silence had settled over the area, broken only by the occasional whisper of leaves in a non-existent breeze. The dark sorcerer's eyes darted from shadow to shadow, his grip tightening on his gnarled staff. Suddenly, the very air seemed to ripple. From the deepening gloom, a figure emerged, Sitrong, his scales glistening like polished opals in the fading light. The carbuncle on his forehead glowed like a miniature sun, pulsing with ancient power. As he slithered forward, the plants around him seemed to bow in reverence. "Datu," Sitrong hissed, his voice calm yet resonating with authority that seemed to shake the very ground. "You trespass in a realm beyond your understanding. Leave this place and spare yourself the folly of seeking what you cannot possess." The sorcerer's eyes narrowed, a sinister smile curling his lips. With a theatrical flourish of his cloak, he stepped forward. "So, the vaunted guardian reveals himself at last," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "I expected something more. Impressive. You are but a serpent, and I am a master of the dark arts. The jewel will be mine, and with it, I will command not just this paltry forest, but realms beyond your imagination." "You underestimate the bond between Maganjan and its guardian," Sitrong replied, his carbuncle flashing brightly. "This jewel is not merely an object of power. It is the heart of the forest, a symbol of harmony and sacrifice. It will never be yours, for you lack the wisdom to wield it." Datu's face contorted with rage. "Wisdom? I'll show you power that goes beyond your petty notions of wisdom." With a snarl, he raised his staff high. The crystal atop it pulsed with sickly green light, and dark tendrils of magic erupted from its tip, snaking towards Sitrong with terrifying speed. But Sitrong was prepared. With a grace that belied his serpentine form, he weaved between the tendrils. His body seemed to flow like water, each movement precise and purposeful. As he dodged, he called out to the forest around them, "Maganjan, lend me your strength." The response was immediate and awe-inspiring. The forest came alive in a spectacular display of natural magic. Massive trees groaned as they bent their ancient trunks, their branches weaving together to form an impenetrable barrier behind Datu, cutting off his retreat. The ground beneath the sorcerer's feet trembled and split as gnarled roots burst forth, writhing like tentacles as they sought to entangle his legs. Datu stumbled, momentarily caught off guard by the forest's response. But he quickly regained his composure, his eyes blazing with dark fire. "Impressive parlor tricks, Serpent, but let me show you true mastery over nature." With a word of power that seemed to sear the air, Datu slammed his staff into the ground. A shockwave of dark energy radiated outward, withering plants and causing smaller trees to crack and splinter. The entangling roots blackened and retreated, smoke rising from their charred forms. Sitrong winced, feeling the forest's pain as if it were his own. But he stood his ground, his voice rising above the cacophony of breaking wood and rumbling earth. "You claim mastery, yet you bring only destruction. The true power of Maganjan lies in creation and renewal." As he spoke, Sitrong's carbuncle blazed with blinding intensity. A wave of golden light washed over the damaged area. Where it touched, new life sprang forth. Saplings burst from the scorched earth, growing years in seconds. Flowers bloomed in a riot of colors, their petals shimmering with an otherworldly light. Datu's eyes widened in disbelief. "Impossible! How can you?" But Sitrong wasn't finished. With a sinuous movement, he reared up, his form seeming to grow larger, more majestic. When he spoke again, his voice carried the wisdom of ages. "Datu, you who were once a protector of your people, look upon what you have become. Is this truly the legacy you wish to leave? Destruction and chaos in pursuit of power that will only corrupt you further?" For a moment, something flickered in Datu's eyes, a hint of the noble leader he had once been. But it was quickly consumed by the darkness that had taken root in his soul. "Save your sermons, Guardian. I've come too far to turn back now. The carbuncle will be mine, and no amount of forest trickery will stop me." With a roar of defiance, Datu unleashed a barrage of dark magic. Bolts of crackling energy tore through the air, leaving trails of acrid smoke. Sitrong moved with incredible speed, his body twisting and coiling as he evaded the attacks. Each bolt that missed him struck the forest, leaving scorch marks and small fires in their wake. "Enough!" Sitrong's voice thundered, filled with a power that seemed to shake the very foundations of Maganjan. The carbuncle on his forehead pulsed, and suddenly, the air was filled with thousands of glowing butterflies. They swarmed around Datu, their wings leaving trails of golden light. The sorcerer swatted at them in frustration, but for each one he dispelled, 10 more seemed to take its place. Soon, he was engulfed in a swirling vortex of light and color, disorienting him and disrupting his concentration. Seizing the moment, Sitrong struck. Moving faster than the eye could follow, he circled Datu, his scales leaving a trail of shimmering energy. The energy coalesced into a glowing barrier, trapping the sorcerer within. Datu raged against his confinement, hurling spell after spell at the barrier. But each attack was absorbed, the energy feeding back into the forest, causing flowers to bloom and trees to grow stronger. Panting with exertion, Datu glared at Sitrong. This is not over, Guardian. I will have the carbuncle, even if I have to tear this entire forest apart to get it." Sitrong met his gaze steadily. "Then we will be here to stop you, Datu, for as long as it takes. Maganjan has stood for millennia, and it will not fall to your ambition." With a final surge of power, Sitrong caused the ground beneath Datu to crack. Before the sorcerer could react, he was sinking, pulled down by the very earth itself. In moments, he had vanished from sight, transported to the outskirts of the forest. As the last echoes of the battle faded, Sitrong surveyed the damage. Though Datu had been repelled, the cost had been high. Parts of the forest lay scorched and broken, a testament to the sorcerer's destructive power. But even as he watched, new growth began to emerge from the devastation. Maganjan was resilient, and with the guidance of its guardian, it would heal. Sitrong knew, however, that this was only the beginning. Datu would return, likely stronger and more determined than ever. As night fell fully over the forest, Sitrong slithered back to the heart of Maganjan. He had much to discuss with his allies, for the true test of their resolve was yet to come. As the full moon rose over Maganjan, its silvery light filtered through the canopy, casting long, deep shadows across the forest floor. The clearing where Sitrong and his allies gathered seemed peaceful, but that tranquility was about to be shattered. Suddenly, the shadows began to writhe and twist, coalescing into a monstrous form. Datu emerged, now a towering, amorphous creature of shadow and malice. His voice boomed, distorted and inhuman. "Sitrong, you thought you had defeated me, but you've only awakened my true power." Sitrong and his friends, Dali, Daya, and Bante, spun around, their eyes widening in horror. The carbuncle on Sitrong's forehead pulsed urgently, sensing the immense danger. Datu struck first, tendrils of pure darkness shooting forth like deadly spears. Sitrong weaved between them, his serpentine body a blur of motion. One tendril grazed his scales, leaving a burning, icy sensation in its wake. Dali leaped into action, her swift legs carrying her in a zigzag pattern. She charged at Datu, aiming her sharp antlers at what seemed to be the creature's core. But at the last moment, Datu's form shifted, becoming insubstantial. Dali passed right through him, momentarily disoriented. Seizing this opportunity, Datu's shadow wrapped around Dali's hind legs, lifting her into the air. The deer kicked and struggled, her hooves passing harmlessly through the shadowy tendrils. With a vicious swing, Datu slammed Dali into a nearby tree. The impact shook the forest, leaves raining down as Dali crumpled to the ground, dazed but still conscious. Daya took to the air, her wings beating furiously. She dive-bombed Datu, her sharp beak aimed at where his eyes should be. "Take this, you monster!" she cried. As she struck, her beak glowed with a strange light, an ancient spell she had prepared for just such an occasion. The spell connected, and for a moment, Datu's form wavered, light piercing through the shadows. He roared in pain and anger, swatting at Daya with massive, clawed hands formed from darkness. Bante seized this moment of distraction. The agile macaque scampered up the nearest tree, leaping from branch to branch until he was directly above Datu. From his fur, he pulled out a handful of seeds, a gift from Lola Amihan. With precise aim, he threw them into the writhing mass of shadows below. The seeds burst into brilliant flashes of light as they made contact, each one like a miniature sun. Datu shrieked, his form billowing and contorting as the light burned away portions of his shadowy body. But the victory was short-lived. Recovering quickly, Datu expanded his form, tendrils of darkness lashing out in all directions. One caught Bante mid-leap, wrapping around the macaque's torso. Bante let out a scream of pain as the darkness seemed to burn him, sapping his strength. Sitrong, seeing his friend in danger, summoned the power of the carbuncle. A beam of golden light shot from the jewel on his forehead, striking the tendril holding Bante. The darkness hissed and recoiled, releasing the macaque. Bante fell, barely managing to grab onto a lower branch, hanging there weakly. Datu's attention now fully on Sitrong. The shadow creature pressed his attack. A barrage of dark projectiles rained down on the Serpent Guardian. Sitrong slithered at incredible speed, dodging most, but a few found their mark, leaving searing cold burns on his scales. "You cannot win, Guardian," Datu laughed, his voice echoing unnaturally. "The night is my domain now, and in the shadows, I am invincible." To prove his point, Datu's form expanded further, engulfing the entire clearing in darkness. Sitrong found himself surrounded, unable to see his friends or the forest around him. He felt the shadows pressing in, sapping his strength and dimming the light of the carbuncle. In the pitch blackness, the battle continued. Sitrong could hear the struggles of his friends. Dali, having regained her footing, charged blindly, trying to use her keen senses to locate Datu. But in this unnatural darkness, even her sharp eyes and ears were dulled. She collided with an invisible barrier of shadow, sending her sprawling once again. Daya flapped desperately in the air, using echolocation to navigate. She unleashed another spell, causing a brief flash of light. At that moment, she saw Datu's massive form and dive-bombed again. But this time, Datu was ready. A tendril of shadow wrapped around her wing, threatening to crush it. Bante, still clinging to the branch, fumbled in his fur for more of Lola Amahan's seeds. Finding one, he threw it blindly into the darkness. It exploded in a shower of sparks, briefly illuminating Datu's twisted face. The macaque gasped at the horrifying visage, momentarily paralyzed with fear. Sitrong, at the center of it all, fought with every ounce of his strength. He created a bubble of light around himself, pushing back the encroaching darkness. But he could feel his power waning, the constant assault of shadows taking its toll. Through the gloom, he heard the pained cries of his friends growing weaker. Dali's labored breathing, Daya's weakening wing beats, Bante's muffled whimpers. Each sound pierced Sitrong's heart like a physical blow. "Give up the carbuncle, Sitrong," Datu's voice whispered from all around. "Give it to me, and I might spare your pathetic friends." Sitrong felt himself weakening, the light of the carbuncle flickering. He had never faced a power like this before, never felt so overwhelmed and outmatched. For the first time since becoming the guardian of Maganjan, Sitrong felt true fear, not for himself, but for the forest and friends he had sworn to protect. As the shadows closed in, threatening to extinguish the last remnants of light, Sitrong made a desperate plea. "Maganjan," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "If ever you needed to lend us your strength, it is now. Please, help us in our darkest hour." The forest seemed to hold its breath, the fate of Maganjan hanging in the balance as Datu's monstrous form loomed over the battered and nearly defeated defenders. Chapter 5: Devour the Light. As Datu's shadow army surged forward, and Sitrong and his friends braced for what seemed like their final stand, a sudden hush fell over the forest. The very air trembled with anticipation, as if Maganjan itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, the trees around the clearing began to emit a soft, ethereal glow. Leaves shimmered with an inner light, creating a mesmerizing dance of green and gold illumination throughout the forest. The light grew stronger, pulsing in rhythm with the very heartbeat of Maganjan. At the center of the clearing, Lola Amahan's ancient form creaked and groaned. Her branches, usually still and majestic, began to move with purpose. They twisted and intertwined, bending in impossible ways to form an intricate, circular pattern in the air. Sitrong watched in awe as the branches wove tighter and tighter, creating a shimmering portal of living wood and glowing leaves. "The forest," he gasped, "it's answering our call." As the portal reached its full formation, a sound like 1,000 wind chimes filled the air. The space within Lola Amahan's branch-woven circle began to ripple and distort, as if reality itself was being bent. From this shimmering gateway, figures began to emerge, tall, lithe, and radiating power. They were the Encanto, beings from the mystic realm of Agartha, clad in armor that shone like liquid gold. Their eyes gleamed with otherworldly wisdom, and each step they took seemed to rejuvenate the forest around them. At their head strode a majestic figure, taller than the rest, with a crown of glowing flowers adorning his head. He spoke, his voice like the rustling of leaves and the rushing of rivers combined. "I am Loken, Lord of Agartha. Maganjan has called, and we have answered. The shadow shall not prevail this day." Datu's shadow form recoiled at the sight of these new allies. "Impossible!" he roared, his voice tinged with fear for the first time. "Agartha is but a myth." Loken's eyes flashed with the light of 1,000 fireflies. "We are as real as the darkness you command, sorcerer. And we are here to remind you of the true power of nature and light." With a gesture from their leader, the Encanto soldiers sprang into action. They moved with fluid grace, their golden armor leaving trails of light that cut through Datu's shadows like sunbeams through mist. Where they touched the shadow creatures, the beasts dissolved into harmless wisps of darkness. Emboldened by this turn of events, Sitrong and his friends found renewed strength. Dolly charged forward, her antlers now wreathed in the same glow as the forest leaves, scattering shadow beasts left and right. Daya took to the skies once more, her wings trailing stardust that burned away the darkness below. Bante leaped from tree to tree, each glowing branch seeming to reach out to aid his jumps. Sitrong himself rose up, his serpentine body reflecting the light of the luminous forest around him. He faced Datu directly, his eyes shining with the combined power of Maganjan's magic. "You see now, Datu?" Sitrong's voice carried the authority of the forest itself. True power comes not from domination, but from harmony with nature and all its creatures. Datu, his shadow form wavering under the onslaught of light and natural magic, lashed out in desperation. Tendrils of darkness shot towards Sitrong, but they were intercepted by Lola Amahan's glowing branches, which burst forth from the ground to protect the Guardian. Loken stepped forward, raising a hand towards Datu. "Your path ends here, Shadow Wielder. Return to the light, or be banished from this realm forever." The Encanto soldiers began to chant in an ancient tongue, their voices weaving a spell of purification. The glow of the forest intensified, mixing with the golden light of the Encanto to create a swirling vortex that surrounded Datu's writhing form. "No!" Datu screamed, his voice distorting as the light pierced his shadowy shell. "I won't be defeated. The darkness is eternal." Continuing from where you indicated, here's the expanded and revised battle scene. As the light pierced through Datu's shadowy form, his monstrous appearance began to melt away. The darkness receded, revealing a frail, thin old man with long white hair that cascaded down his back. In his gnarled hands, he clutched a large black tome, its cover adorned with arcane symbols that seemed to writhe and shift. Datu's eyes, though sunken, burned with an intense, manic light. "You think me defeated?" he rasped, his voice no longer booming but still filled with malice. With trembling fingers, he opened the book, its pages emitting a faint, sickly glow. As Datu began to chant in an eldritch tongue, the air around him shimmered with dark energy. Recognizing the danger, Loken acted swiftly. He raised his hand, and a spear of pure light materialized in his grasp. With unerring accuracy, he hurled the spear towards the black tome. The spear of light struck the book dead center, resulting in a catastrophic explosion of supernatural energy. The blast sent Datu flying backward, slamming him against a tree. He slumped to the ground, coughing up blood, his frail body racked with pain. For a moment, it seemed the battle was over. But Datu, his face contorted with rage and desperation, reached for the talisman hanging around his neck. "If I cannot have the power I seek," he snarled, "then I shall embrace the darkness fully." With a violent motion, he tore the talisman from his neck and smashed it into the bloody dirt at his feet. The moment the talisman shattered, the ground began to glow with an ominous purple light. Black, inky tendrils erupted from the earth, writhing and pulsating with malevolent energy. Before anyone could react, the tendrils latched onto Datu, enveloping him in a cocoon of darkness. His agonized screams turned into a demonic howl as the dark energy possessed him, transforming him once again. From the cocoon emerged a nightmarish figure, Datu, now a twisted amalgamation of man and shadow, his eyes glowing with infernal fire. He raised his arms, and the purple-tinged earth trembled. "Rise, Myoninos!" Datu's voice echoed with otherworldly power. "Devour the light!" The ground split open, and from the fissures emerged terrifying creatures. Werewolf-like beasts with matted fur and razor-sharp claws clawed their way to the surface. Monstrous wolves with eyes like smoldering coals and teeth that gleamed like obsidian daggers prowled forward. Other indescribable horrors, born from the darkest nightmares, joined the ranks of Datu's new army. Loken and his Encanto soldiers, caught off guard by this sudden turn of events, found themselves on the defensive. The Aninos charged forward with supernatural speed and ferocity. A massive werewolf lunged at an Encanto warrior, its claws raking against the golden armor. Sparks flew as light and darkness clashed. Another Encanto thrust his spear into a shadow wolf, only to have the creature dissolve into mist and reform behind him, sinking its teeth into his shoulder. Loken himself faced off against a towering monstrosity that seemed to be made of living shadow and bone. His sword of light carved through the creature's form, but for every piece he cut away, two more grew back. The tide of battle had shifted dramatically. The Encanto, for all their power and skill, were being pushed back by the relentless onslaught of Datu's dark army. Amidst the chaos, Sitrong saw Dali cornered by three snarling shadow wolves. The deer fought bravely, her glowing antlers keeping the beasts at bay, but she was tiring quickly. Nearby, Bante was trapped atop a tree, desperately throwing whatever he could find at the werewolves circling below. Without hesitation, Sitrong slithered towards his friends, determination burning in his eyes. He weaved through the battle, dodging claws and fangs, his body a blur of motion. Just as he reached Dali, sending two of the shadow wolves flying with a powerful sweep of his tail, a dark figure loomed before him. Datu, his form now a terrifying blend of shadow and flesh, stood between Sitrong and his friends. "At last, Guardian," Datu's voice dripped with malice. "It's time to end this." In his hand, Datu held a dagger that seemed to be forged from pure darkness. Its edge flickered with purple flames, and the very air around it seemed to warp and twist. Sitrong reared up, ready to defend his friends and the forest he had sworn to protect. "Your darkness will never triumph, Datu," he declared, the forest's light pulsing around him. With inhuman speed, Datu lunged forward. Sitrong moved to dodge, but he was a fraction too slow. The dark Ballarah struck true, its blade connecting with the carbuncle on Sitrong's forehead. There was a moment of terrible silence, then a sound like shattering crystal filled the air. The carbuncle, the source of Sitrong's power and his connection to Maganjan, cracked and then broke apart. As fragments of the mystical gem fell to the forest floor, Sitrong felt an overwhelming sense of loss and pain. The light in the forest flickered, and a collective gasp seemed to emanate from every tree and creature. Datu's triumphant laughter echoed through the battlefield, as Sitrong, weakened and disconnected from the forest's power, collapsed to the ground. The fate of Maganjan now hung by a thread, with its guardian fallen and the forces of darkness on the cusp of victory. Finale: Serpent with the red crest. As Sitrong lay on the forest floor, his life force ebbing away, the shattered carbuncle on his forehead crumbled into a fine, crimson dust. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The battle momentarily paused as all eyes turned to the fallen guardian. With his last ounce of strength, Sitrong inhaled deeply, drawing the mystical red dust into his body. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, a blinding light erupted from within him, enveloping the clearing in a brilliant crimson glow. When the light faded, Sitrong was gone. In his place rose a majestic creature, Markupo, the gigantic serpent with the red crest. His scales shimmered with an iridescent sheen, each one a miniature prism refracting the forest's light. Atop his head, a magnificent red crest pulsed with power, sending waves of energy rippling through the air. Markupo's eyes, now glowing with an inner fire, turned to his friends. With a thought, he channeled the newfound power coursing through him. Dolly was engulfed in a soft, white light. As it faded, she emerged as Lampong, an ethereal white deer with grand, spiraling horns that seemed to be crafted from moonlight itself. Her hooves barely touched the ground, leaving trails of stardust with each step. Bante, too, was transformed. The nimble macaque grew in size, his form shifting and expanding until he stood as tall as the ancient trees. His fur took on a golden hue, and his tail elongated, becoming a powerful weapon in its own right. Ikugan, the giant monkey, let out a roar that shook the very foundations of Maganjan. Datu, momentarily stunned by this unexpected turn of events, quickly regained his composure. With a snarl, he commanded his Anitos to attack. The shadow beast surged forward, a tide of darkness threatening to engulf the newly transformed heroes. Markupo moved with lightning speed, his serpentine body weaving through the air. The red crest on his head blazed with power as he unleashed bolts of crimson energy. Where they struck, the Anitos howled in pain, their shadowy forms dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Lampong charged into the fray, her ethereal form passing through the shadow creatures as if they were smoke. But wherever she touched, light bloomed, burning away the darkness. Her grand horns swept through the ranks of the Anitos, leaving trails of purifying light in their wake. Ikugan's massive fists pounded the earth, sending shockwaves that scattered the shadow beasts. His long tail whipped through the air, catching werewolves and shadow wolves mid-leap and hurling them back into the darkness from whence they came. The tide of battle had turned once again. The Anitos, for all their ferocity, found themselves outmatched by the raw power and synergy of the three transformed heroes. Loken and his Encanto warriors, reinvigorated by this display, pressed forward with renewed vigor. Datu, seeing his army faltering, decided to take matters into his own hands. Drawing upon the last reserves of his dark power, he transformed once more. His body expanded, becoming a colossal shadow dragon, his wings blotting out the moonlight as he took to the sky. Markupo's eyes narrowed as he watched Datu ascend. With a silent command to his friends to handle the remaining Anitos, the serpent with the red crest launched himself into the air, his long body undulating as he climbed higher and higher. The two titans clashed in the night sky, their battle illuminating the heavens. Datu breathed streams of shadow fire, while Markupo countered with blasts of crimson energy from his crest. They twisted and turned, each trying to gain the upper hand, their massive forms silhouetted against the moon. Below, Lampong and Ikugan worked in perfect harmony to decimate the remaining shadow creatures. Lampong's light weakened them, while Ikugan's raw strength finished them off. The Encanto soldiers pressed forward, reclaiming the forest inch by inch. In the sky, Markupo finally saw his opening. As Datu reared back to unleash another blast of shadow fire, Markupo surged forward. His red crest blazing like a newborn star, he plunged straight into Datu's chest. There was a moment of terrible silence, then an explosion of light that lit up the night like day. When the light faded, Datu was falling, his draconic form dissolving as he plummeted towards the earth. Markupo dove after him, catching the now-human sorcerer in his coils just before he hit the ground. As Markupo gently deposited Datu on the forest floor, the last of the Anitos faded away, their connection to their master severed. The clearing fell silent, save for the soft glow of Lampong's form and the heavy breathing of Ikugan. Datu, now a frail old man once more, looked up at Markupo with a mix of fear and awe. The serpent with the red crest towered over him, his crest pulsing with barely contained power. Yet, there was no malice in Markupo's eyes, only a deep, ancient wisdom. "It's over, Datu," Markupo spoke, his voice resonating with the very essence of Maganjan. "Your darkness has been defeated." Datu, his body broken and his power spent, could only nod in acceptance. He slumped to his knees before Markupo, the once proud sorcerer now a pitiful figure in the face of true power born of sacrifice and the power of nature. The old man settled into his rocking chair, his weathered hands resting on his lap as he gazed at his 3 grandchildren seated before him on woven mats. Lucas, the eldest, sat with rapt attention, while Anita fidgeted excitedly, and little Reuben hugged his stuffed monkey close. "Lolo," Anita chirped, "tell us a story about the forest." The old man's eyes twinkled as he began, "Very well, my little ones. Let me tell you about what happened after the great battle in Maganjan. With the darkness broken and the sorcerer defeated, the forest of Maganjan was rejoicing. The air hummed with renewed life, and even the smallest leaf seemed to dance with joy. But amidst the celebration, a solemn gathering took place in a moonlit clearing. Markupo, the majestic serpent with the red crest, coiled silently, his scales shimmering with an otherworldly light. Beside him stood Lampong, the ethereal white deer, and Ikugan, the giant golden monkey. Facing them were the noble Lakan, lord of Birinan, and the ancient Lola Amihan, her branches swaying gently in a non-existent breeze. At the center of their circle, guarded by 2 tall, silent Encanto warriors, knelt the defeated sorcerer, Datu. Lakan spoke first, his voice resonating with authority. "The threat has been neutralized, but now we must decide the fate of the one who brought such darkness to our realm." Lampong stepped forward, her eyes flashing with righteous anger. "He should be executed for his crimes. Look at the destruction he has wrought upon our beloved forest. How many lives were lost or forever changed because of his lust for power?" Ikugan nodded in agreement, his massive fists clenching. "Lampong speaks true. The forest cries out for justice. We cannot risk him ever threatening Maganjan again." Lola Amihan's leaves rustled as she interjected, her voice like wind through ancient boughs. "Violence begets violence, my children. Have we not seen enough destruction this day? Perhaps there is another way." Lakan nodded solemnly. "I agree. In Birinan, we have means to contain even the darkest of magics. Let him be imprisoned there, where he can harm no one else and perhaps, in time, find redemption." The debate continued, voices rising and falling like the tide. Markupo remained silent throughout, his gaze never leaving the kneeling sorcerer. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the leaves. As if by magic, the transformations of Lampong and Ikugan began to fade. The ethereal deer and giant monkey shimmered and shrank, returning to their original forms of Dali and Bante. In the sudden hush that followed, Markupo finally moved. He slithered forward, coming face to face with the sorcerer. The old man looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "I admit the wrong I have done," the sorcerer spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I will accept all the punishment my actions deserve. I was drunk on power, and if I could have another chance, I would give my life to return the forest to how it was before I came here." Markupo nodded, his red crest pulsing gently. "Well said." To everyone's surprise, Markupo's throat began to glow with a golden light. From his mouth emerged a glowing orb, around which a tiny serpent was coiled. The orb floated gently into the sorcerer's open hands. "I am amazed by the humility of your words," Markupo declared, "and I will place you to guard the forest." His voice carried the weight of ancient wisdom as he continued, "This is my command to you. Guard the forest and teach other humans to respect the forest and all that are living inside it. If you are in danger, use the Mutya and help will come." As the sun rose higher, Marcupo and his friends began to fade into the shade of the forest. The old sorcerer rose from his knees and faced the glowing sun. With tears in his eyes and the golden ball clutched tightly in his hands, he whispered a prayer of thanks, grateful for forgiveness and the chance at redemption. And that, my dear ones, the old man concluded, is how the sorcerer came to be the guardian of our forest. The children sat in awed silence for a moment before erupting into excited chatter. "Thank you, Lolo," they chorused, hugging the old man. With a warm smile, he rose from his chair, placing a gentle hand on each child's head in blessing before turning to leave the kubo. As he walked towards the front yard gate, Anita called out, "Goodbye, Lolo Datu. Tell us another story next time." The old man waved in return, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. As he approached the trees at the foot of the mountain, his hand found the orb hanging from his neck. It glowed with a soft red light as he stepped into the embrace of the forest, fading into the darkness beyond. The young girl watched her Lolo Datu disappear, unaware that she had just witnessed the living legend of Maganjan returning to his eternal vigil as the old hermit, guardian of the forest.
We want to bring our rich and amazing history and beliefs as stories that the whole world can enjoy. We hope you had a great time listening to these creative tales as much as we enjoyed writing and making them. We would love to hear your thoughts about the stories. Let us know in the comments section and share the video to your friends. If you like this kind of videos, please hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to show your support and help us produce more content for you. You can reach us through our Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Say hi. We would love to hear from our friends and grow the community. Thank you, and stay spooky.